Good evening. I would like to call to order the public meeting of January 7th, 2025. Mr. Berardi, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Good evening, Lower Moreland Township School District community. My name is Dr. James Lee. Thank you for attending this evening's meeting of the Lower Moreland Board of School Directors. I'd like to remind our board, as well as members of the public, that this meeting is being live streamed on our district YouTube channel, and that a recording of the meeting will be posted on our school board website within 48 hours. I welcome my fellow board members and members of the public. To our board members, please be reminded that for sound purposes, you must turn on your microphone and speak directly into it for the sound to be audible both for in-person community members in the auditorium, but also for anyone listening on the live stream. After speaking, please mute your microphone. Before I ask Mr. McGuinn to take the roll call of the board, I'd like to ask the public to observe a few moments of silence to observe the passing of President Jimmy Carter. Thank you very much. Mr. McGuinn, would you please take a roll call of the board?
Certainly. Mrs. Baker.
Present.
Mr. Berardi.
Here.
Ms. Blanton.
Here.
Dr. Butler. Dr. Butler is absent. Ms. Cannon.
Present.
Ms. Darian.
Present.
Mr. Geiger.
Present.
Dr. Lee.
Present.
Mr. McKee.
Present.
There are 8 members present.
Thank you. I will now ask Dr. Best to take a roll call of cabinet members and administrators who will be participating this evening.
Sure. Ms. Galdo.
Present.
Dr. Hemrick.
Present.
Mr. Giordano.
Present.
Mr. Thomas. Present. Mr. Miles. Mr. McGuinn.
Here.
Dr. Hilt.
Here.
All members present. I'm sorry. I apologize. I missed one. Mr. Freeman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Best. That will bring us to our presentations and discussions for this evening. We'll start with our student representative to the board.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Adona, and I will be presenting for Mia today because unfortunately she's feeling a bit under the weather. Today, I'm going to present all the school climate updates for each of the 4 schools, as well as an update to the cell phone plan. At Pine Road, students and staff celebrated the holiday season. Each classroom had a variety of holiday parties where everyone came together to enjoy delicious treats, play games, and share in the joy of the season. The classrooms were filled with holiday decorations, and it was a special time for students to bond with teachers. At Murray Avenue, the PTA surprised the faculty by hosting their annual cookie trays to showcase the community's appreciation for the teachers and staff. According to Mr. Stroop, Murray Avenue's principal, Murray Avenue had a fun week heading into the winter break filled with themed dress-up days, classroom parties, grade-level celebrations, and celebrations for teachers. A special thank you to our PTA and homeroom parents for helping make this week such a memorable experience for students and staff. At the middle school, students who participate in Lion Voice had the exciting opportunity to perform this at the 76ers game. This is such an incredible thing that our school gives to these future singers. And we have all the smiling kids posing. Lastly, at the high school, this was very exciting. Nakobe Dean graced us with his presence. Philadelphia Eagles, he came to our school and he spoke, and it was great to hear him talk. And we, speaking as a high schooler, we don't get this many opportunities to see, famous people, and this was a very exciting opportunity, especially since Eagles are heading to the playoffs. Some more pictures there. He spoke to a lot of the student leadership, so me, Mia, some of the student council, as well as the football team, as you can see on the right. And he also talked to one of the engineering classes because at his college he majored in engineering. Now, some of you may remember last work session, we talked about the cell phone plan, and I showed you guys some of the Google Forms that went out regarding the cell phone plan and some of the feedback that students had given us. You guys said that you would like to see some progress with it, so Mia and I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Miles. It was supposed to be yesterday, but unfortunately due to the snow day, we've pushed out to Friday. So you'll hear more about that next work session. That's all for today. Thank you guys so much. As always, are there any questions? Oh, all right, thank you.
Great, thank you. That'll bring us to our second presentation. We will have a high school project update from Mr. Jamie Lynch.
Good evening, members of Lower Moreland Township School District, board members, administration. I think this might be my last formal presentation to you on the high school, so you're probably glad to get rid of me so that you can get on with presentations and shorter board meetings. But I'm here to discuss ultimately what is really the closeout of the high school project. And I can use the mouse to scroll. There we go. So when last we met, we were talking again about the intersection projects, and I'm pleased to identify that for the most part, that work is now complete. Mast arms, pedestrian crossings, paving, and issues related to PICO are now in the rear view mirror. And so you've seen that out on Red Lion Road with all of the completed work on both driveways. So it's nice that it's finished. PennDOT still has to do their dirty work of verifying the final punch list. Pannoni has forms as the designer to submit to PennDOT because of the roadway work. We need to close that PennDOT permit and provide as-built, and then we'll be able to make final payment to Morrissey, who is the general contractor. So it's nice to see that it's a short list. The accounting is included in the presentation here. We're presently holding a balance of $40,000 on Morrissey. On your agenda this evening is a final action for approval of change order 7 and 8. We'll probably combine them. One item that's in there are two items, excuse me. One is for trench repair of the PICO work, and the other is for additional temporary striping due to the PICO gas service delay. The total cost is just over $54,000. The large item there is the trench repair for PICO work. And I just wanted to identify for you what that was, because you've heard about the PICO line replacement and the work that was done, and that was approved and paid directly to PICO in the past. PennDOT came back, examined the work that PICO did under that payment, and identified that their paving repairs did not comply with PennDOT standards. And so we paid this change order proposed to Morrissey in order to make the paving changes out on Red Lion, which they have now done. So with this change order and the final items there on the punch list, including as-built, we'd be in a position to make final payment to Morrissey. On the high school itself, there's a rather long list here of updated items. I won't go through them item by item, but we're at the point where we can now effectively close out the mechanical contract, the general contract, and also the electrical contract. Final payment can be made to the mechanical contractor and to the electrical contractor. We're still holding some dollars in the amount of $60,000 for the last punch list items for Borough, the general contractor. And they relate to the replacement of millwork in the library, work to install a ladder in the water meter vault, and basically a couple of warranty items. But for the most part, first of all, Borough's been responsive. They've gotten after this work. Two of the big items had to do with rolling gate repairs under a warranty that they've started work on. The other ones had to do, and I'm sure you've heard about the elevators, and I understand we now have something close to 2 months of working elevators, so that's very good news. It's been working out well there. Mechanical contract is done. There are no punch list items. Electrical contractor is done. There are no further punch list items there. And so a couple of site items for the general contractor and closing out the NPDS permit is all that's in front of us. This is the overall funding of the project as far as approved change orders, and the action for your consideration this month is summarized here on this slide. We have $39,799.75 in final change orders for Borough Construction, the general contractor, and a credit of $58,792.18 coming back for unused material allowance for the mechanical contractor. Also on the electric contract, there are no further change orders. Their contract is finished, and so we'd be able to make their final payment. In summary, for the $39,000 for the general contract, there's a list provided in the presentation. It's a list of ads and credits, again, totaling just over $39,000 that you see here. Some of these are items that we've been negotiating with Borough for quite some time. These are also credits here for some of the cleaning that the district paid in order to get the building ready, and it being back charged to the GC. So that's the total list right there. And I've got an updated budget for you here. Still plus or minus, project is about $500,000 under total budget. I know Mr. McGuinn has been working on how to apply the DCED grant, also earned interest on the project in order to cover the costs that are associated with the intersections. So I understand that we're still in good shape there as far as the overall project goes. With that, I say thank you and happy to try to entertain any questions that you might have.
Jamie, it's been some time now. We had some issues early on getting that permit going, the MPDS permit, which held us up. We had talked about possibly there being some liability on that, and I guess we just kind of move forward from that. Is that something, is that ringing a bell to you at all?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the NPDS permit approval was delayed by the Conservation District, and you recall that we worked like the Dickens in order to get that permit released. There are a lot of changes and addendums that were submitted by the design team. Fortunately, the Conservation District gave us a Phase 1 approval. You'll recall back in the day that allowed us to get the driveway work done in the first summer. That was essential. I think that it's best when you're discussing anything from a legal standpoint that we engage the solicitor and take a look at that with you. It's a very fine line between how well a permit submission for the Conservation District should be put together and what is a reasonable amount of time. There were also some issues from the Conservation District. Montgomery County is very diligent in their reviews. They have very good people there. They want to cross their T's and dot their I's, and they have very stringent stormwater requirements. And it was a complex project. We've talked about MRC basins and stormwater basins, and they were all wrapped up and a part of the review. I'd be happy to assist if you want to re-examine that issue, but we should probably engage the services of your solicitor as well if that's, you know, a tack that the board would like to consider.
Thank you.
Mr. Lynch, could you just go into a little bit more the trench work not being up to the standards for PennDOT and why we are on the hook for that?
Thank you. I anticipated that question because it is an understandable question. So recall, if you will, that we were asked by PECO to come back and replace several hundred feet of gas line due to its location under existing Red Lion Road, to which, of course, we made an effort to say, why would the district be responsible for this cost? And that's a very justifiable question. And in the eyes of any public utility, they say, if you touched it, you own it, which unfortunately seems unfair. So the only person that can do the relocation is PECO. We went to PECO, said, okay, give us the price to do the relocation. And of course, time is of the essence, right? We had to get this work cleaned up. They gave us their price, they gave us their proposal, we talked about it, it was agreed upon, and we got it from PECO, who should know exactly what they're doing. They have a subcontractor, they performed all of the work, the trench restoration was done, and of course, PennDOT comes in and says, no, it's great that you did it to PECO standards, but it needs to be done to our standards. And so that's what required the mill and overlay of the entire travel lane, okay? Now, so let's do what if, right? What if PECO did it correctly and came back to us and said, this is what it takes to be compliant with PennDOT? The cost would have been much greater at the time. Did the district pay a premium for the paving work, which effectively was, I don't want to say it was done twice, but it was restored, and then we had to come back and mill and overlay? The district did pay that premium because of what the public utility has done. The question there is, how do we compensate the district. Again, it's been borne by you. It's been borne by our taxpayers. How would you recoup that from PICO at this point? How do you fight City Hall is the response. Could you engage in those conversations? You absolutely could. And I think it's worth at least a piece of correspondence. Unfortunately, in my experience, when we've gone down this route and there's been an error by a public utility, it's an uphill battle. But once again, if you need the assistance from us in order to at least make that foray, in order to get the satisfactory answer or a answer out of PICO, we'd be happy to help.
Any other questions for Mr. Lynch? So if I could just ask one more. So, if this is your last and final presentation, we thank you for all your work. Just looking at the budget, the final line, just so our public can have a sort of very simple awareness of where we landed. Please, Mr. McGuinn, please correct me if I'm wrong. So we budgeted the total cost about 70 million. You're saying that we are about 600 under budget, but then there's also the credits for Murray Avenue. So,
Right, so we've always, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
were you finished?
so essentially, are we now 100 under budget?
So thank you. So we've always tried to identify that in the remaining contingency of 598, as you see it on this slide, 523 of that is a credit for not demolishing Murray Avenue. We've gone through that with the accounting several times. Now, this is my accounting of the project, and we've worked with Mr. McGuinn, who, as I mentioned, in the terms of interest earned on the bonds. I never see that. So I never see what the true financial number is. To me, I see that you're something approaching $100,000 under budget with the credit from Murray Avenue. And it sounds like it might even be a little bit better than that. For your edification and that of the public, I look back and I congratulate the district, everyone from administration, everyone who was on the board, because I just really look fondly on this project because of what we did and the decisions that were made by the district to proceed in the midst of the pandemic. And we got approval for this project in the midst of the pandemic. We bid this project right after the end of the pandemic. And do the math however you would like to do it. We have a new high school for something that is in the neighborhood of $270 a square foot, which is unheard of right now. So the decision by the district to proceed when there was much trepidation, and there was much trepidation even on behalf of the township, but everybody worked together, and there's tremendous value in this project when we're budgeting projects now in excess of $400 a square foot. So I congratulate you on all of the work that was put in. I congratulate you in the trust that you had with us and the entire design team at KCBA. It's been, for the most part, an extraordinary project. We overcame, tremendous challenges, and I think you have a fantastic building.
Thank you. I agree. I think the building speaks for itself. And perhaps, Mr. McGuinn, maybe in the budget presentation, my only question is there any line item that will represent some monies or funds from the being under budget that will be incorporated into our school budget? annual budget?
It'll, not necessarily school budget, but it'll be reflected, and you'll see it in the new financial statements. It's been moved over to the capital projects fund. We needed to ensure that that bond fund was completely exhausted as of December 7th due to arbitrage, which is a calculation you have to spend down all of your funds and not earn an exorbitant amount of interest. And in doing so, we still have some line items obviously to pay, so we moved it over to the capital projects fund. As Mr. Lynch indicated, we did have some other expenditures. We are still waiting for, of the original DCED grant, $60,000 through the township. We're still waiting for that. They are working with DCED on that. And then, if you recall, for this PICO original line relocation, we put a request into Representative Genst and Senator Collette to be hopefully included in Governor Shapiro's 25-26 budget to hopefully recoup. That was about $110,000 that we had to pay directly to PICO. Through the extra expenditures that we had, if you recall, we had a line item for intersection repairs, we thought was going to be, I think it was $500,000, and it came in over $1 million. Offset, obviously, with not knocking down Murray. We've had some interest earnings, so we will definitely have some funds left over from capital, to be put in the capital projects. We just want to make, I want to, before I say exactly how much, I want to make sure that we get everything paid, anything straggling out there paid, before we report that to the board. But we can certainly update the board in a future board report. The only other thing I'll say is, to echo what Mr. Lynch said, we were probably one of the last two projects, our high school and I think Upper Marion were probably the last two that you can account for square footage of what we typically 3-4 years ago thought was normal, up to $270 per square foot. I know I have other design professionals out in the audience, and that number just has skyrocketed. To try to build this school, this school today, we would be paying probably at least $35 to $40 million more, just because of the cost of construction. And as Mr. Lynch has said, and I know he said this in various presentations that he's done statewide, unfortunately, those costs really skyrocketed. You don't really see those costs coming back down. They've set a new plateau and they've kind of leveled there for a while, but they're not coming down. So I'm in the foreseeable future, it'll be challenging for any school district to build with these new high costs of dollars. And I don't know if you want to wrap it up there, Mr. Lynch, with that?
No, I mean, it's absolutely accurate. Again, just to, applaud the district, the team that was here. I'm sure, you have professionals that are on board now. They're benefiting from the questions that this board raises, the intensity in which administration goes after projects and scrutinizes everything on a project, all of the input. The work of the township was a big benefit to this project as well. So we always just love having great team members who are really engaged and really intentional in what they do on the buildings. And you're a perfect example of that. So stellar client. So I say thank you. And that also comes from Ashley Pogliese, who was on site, who just really did a stellar job for everybody and has been just responsive to the end on trying to get these intersections finished for you. Ashley's, a rock star, and she's about to go and do a very large high school renovation project. So she's been in Reading, and now she's going up to Pleasant Valley to renovate their high school.
Mr. Lynch, one other fortuitous situation, again, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, is the debt service, too. We hit municipal interest rates when interest rates were 0. And so whatever we borrowed at 1.5%, 2% less than what the rates are today. So that on top of less square footage is just
Exactly.
extremely helpful.
You see what your neighbor school districts are about to embark on. And, the other side of this is there are fewer contractors willing to go to that level. Pick a district that surrounds you in Montgomery County and the ones that are also doing very large high school projects. There's a race going on right now. Whoever can get to the completion of design and get something out and bid and started with construction is fantastic, because there are some other projects. There's a dozen $200+ million high school projects coming, and there aren't enough contractors to do those jobs. So it's fantastic that you weren't even close to being in that situation.
Mr. McGuinn, if whatever the premium is from the PICO redoing or PennDOT redoing it, maybe we can add that to the request that we're asking the state for reimbursement.
We can do that. I think we're gonna do the avenue or due diligence and go through PICO first. That way we can have, unfortunately, and it sounds like inevitably, if we have that denial, there might be also good ammunition in
Yes.
hand to say, hey, once again, this was not our fault.
Right.
And certainly make the ask.
Let's do it. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you again for entertaining all our questions and discussion points. Mr.
Always, it's a
Lynch.
pleasure. Thank you. You know where to find us.
That'll bring us to our next agenda item 2C, which is facilities assessment and planning, next steps from our colleagues at ICS.
Good evening, folks. Again, John Young from ICS, Tim Guider from ICS, Cody West, Bob Hunter, faces that you should be pretty familiar with this at this point. We appreciate the opportunity. Okay, thanks. We appreciate the opportunity to come in here and share, the latest updates from our continued collaboration with the administration. We were charged with taking that holistic capital plan and facilities plan that we developed over last year and really reducing it to the more imminent needs identified for the district to match the $3 million approximately in available funds, develop projects based upon that warm, safe, dry approach. As you recall, we went through the buildings and have, on the ensuing slides here, some things about, the broad scope that we were really presented with and is necessary in understanding the needs of a district over time. This is a reduction of that where we really bring those priorities down to meet with available funds. We took those different items, the exhaustive list, and put them into the priorities of imminent and levels 1, 2, and 3. The project and items that we'll talk with you about tonight are all in that imminent nature. We're going to try to address the first tranche of imminent items and then, going forward, talk about how we can look at those priorities over time going forward. So you'll recall this, this graphic here that shows, this is just by industry standards, the ages of some of the infrastructure inside your buildings. Again, this is not a plan, right? This is just part of the plan that gives you a general sense of where you are with these different systems inside of buildings. There's several items on here that aren't going to meet that warm, safe, dry standard, right, when we're prioritizing things. Lighting, for example, this can affect your educational environment necessarily, but it isn't systemic that it's going to fail and you can't have school, right? So when we're talking about warm, safe, dry, it's really things that are to keep the building open and keep the facilities viable going forward. So we'll express that as we go through these different items, but this is just to differentiate. Again, this is, just a piece of the puzzle that gives you an idea where you're at in particular buildings based upon these industry standards. It's not a plan, right? So we're going to be focusing on that warm, safe, dry approach when we show you these next sets of priorities, right? So these were the ones that, the line items that you'd be familiar with from that, rather large budget items that we showed you before. The ones that are in green are the first tranche of imminent need items. The ones that are in black that we won't really focus on are ones that we feel that can be deferred. Again, these aren't ones that are no longer issues. They're just ones that aren't at the top of the priority list. And again, ones that probably don't exactly meet that imminent need for warm, safe, and dry. There are challenges, particularly at the low, with cooling and chiller plants across several of the district buildings. We've prioritized here based upon, some criteria around redundancy, known issues, and so forth. So that we'll get into the depth of these as we go forward. But going to the air distribution systems, inside here would be the unit for the pool, the humidification, right? The RTU at Pine Row that you had measured temperatures inside the facility, in excess of 80 degrees at times. Once you get up to those levels, you start having a cascading set of issues inside of buildings. So that's a high priority. Those are both very high priority items. The HVAC controls, these are portions of the systems that really enable you to actually make the learning environment viable. Without these, you're going to lose buildings and, again, have this cascading set of issues conceivably and are best put at the top of the list whenever you're prioritizing. Moving forward, fire alarm systems, there are more needs across the district. over time that you will see, but this first tranche at the 2 buildings will address some of those needs, the most imminent of them. And again, these are systems that are going to, keep that safety in line and keep you inside the schools. Again, we'll go through and get a little bit more in depth about them, but this is generally how we had this set of different categories that were identified in previous presentations, and the ones that we've pulled out of there and prioritized, again, with constant interaction with Mr. McGuinn, Dr. Best, Lance, to get a better understanding of where the pain points were, bringing in, our understandings from that facility condition assessment in concert with, at some level, the ages of those systems, right? So I'm going to pass it over to Tim Guider, and he'll kind of walk through the packages for this initial tranche.
Good evening, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be back here again in front of you guys. So after our team prioritized these projects with the administration, we sat down and kind of broke them up into these packages. So you can see the way that we grouped them. Bid package 1 is really the airside equipment, so the rooftop units, or the rooftop unit, I should say, at Pine Road, and the pool dehumidification unit at the middle school. Bid package 2 is the fire alarm replacements at Murray and Pine Road, and package 3 is the Murray Ave controls upgrades on the network side, and then lastly, bid package 4 is the chiller plant at Murray Ave. The numbers that you see here are fully loaded numbers, so construction costs, what we would expect the contractors to come in for their bids to be, and then plus professional services and other owner costs like permits and additional costs that the owner would have to incur, legal fees, et cetera. We do have a breakdown on one of the slides coming up, so we'll go into that in a little bit more detail there. And also dive into the scope a little bit. We're not going to go into an incredible amount of detail here, but just overall the bid packages, bid package 1 with the rooftop units. This is the rooftop unit that serves the administration area at Pine Road Elementary, and it would be replaced reusing ductwork, reconnecting to the control system and electrical, et cetera. We would also evaluate and add alternate potentially to replace the VAV boxes, which are the individual controls within the zones of that admin area. So that gives flexibility to the district when this goes out to bid. If the bids come in favorably, you can add that. You have the option of adding replacement VAV boxes in, or you can reuse the existing and just recommission them to save some cost if you need to. The pool dehumidification unit at the middle school would be replaced and tied into the existing ductwork. As part of the design effort, we would evaluate different configurations of that unit. So they're pretty complex systems. One pool dehumidification unit can just temper and dehumidify the air serving that space. Another configuration would be doing that in addition to heating the pool water itself. So we would evaluate different options there and look at the application with your team. Bid package 2 and 3, so the fire alarm system replacements really would be replacing the existing devices with the current NFPA required horn and strobe devices, also the new fire panel at those 2 buildings. And then the network upgrade, basically the existing controls are obsolete, so it's a hardware replacement in addition to software upgrade, and then pulling in all the existing field equipment into these new controls, recommissioning the control system, and making sure that everything's operating within Murray Ave. And then lastly, the chiller plant. This building has 2 chiller plants, actually, main plant and the admin plant. This would include complete replacement of both plants, including piping, air separators, accessories, pumps, in addition to the chiller themselves and the cooling tower for the main plant. We would, similarly with the pool dehumidification unit, as part of design, we would evaluate different configurations. One in particular would be That main plant has a single-stage compressor currently, so we look at multiple stage compressor to give you some redundancy and better staging, and the unit should operate more efficiently as well. So we'd evaluate those as part of the design phase together with the administration and select the best unit selection there for you. And then the admin plant similarly would be replaced with the chiller. This slide shows the budget breakdown. Kind of starting at the top, you see all the construction costs for Murray Ave, the middle school, and Pine Road Elementary. And then flowing down, there's other construction-related costs. So we've included site supervision during construction. This is, managing the contractors on site while they're doing work. And then general conditions and construction contingency as well at 5%, which is typical for our budgeting efforts. Professional services, including design, procurement, testing, insurance, legal, those other fees that need to be part of a project like this. In addition to other owner costs, permits like you're familiar with after the high school project, right? All these budget items. So this is a full-blown budget. This is everything that we see that would be included or need to be included in a project of this magnitude. And the total is $3 million at the bottom. And then if the board decided to move forward with the project, our team, ICS, would provide program management services. So this is really being responsible for completing the design effort, maintaining the project budget, engaging contractors for bidding, overseeing the whole procurement and bidding process, and then managing construction, closing the project out, and then providing regular updates to the board as construction progresses. It's really, we'd be an extension of your district team, managing the project from end to end through construction. Here's kind of a tentative schedule that we put together. This would assume the board consider and approve this project moving forward in January. Over the course of February through April, we would complete the design, assemble all the bidding documents, release the documents for bidding in May, and then come back in June with recommended contractors to perform the work. And then over the course of the next year, we would be staging construction, coordinating with the school year and the school calendar to minimize disruption to education while construction is going on. And then lastly, separate from the capital project one that we've identified, the administration requested that we look into coming up with an idea to continue moving the ball with this stadium discussion. So one way that we've tackled that is to really dip your toe into design, not take on a full design, but do conceptual design here. Really enough information for us to identify all the components that would go into the stadium project, evaluate that with your district stakeholders, including your athletic department, make sure that we've got all those components baked in, the site analysis completed, right? Any of the stormwater management is accounted for, underground utilities, all that could be budgeted for. Come back and present a tight, detailed budget with a more refined scope to better inform the board to potentially continue moving forward with the stadium project at that point. The fees for this would cost just under $30,000. It would be on a time material basis, not to exceed the $30,000. We've already accounted for this $9,500 deduction, which was part of our phase one assessment and plan. So that's included in that $29,740. As part of our team, we would have T&M Associates. They were in here last year, presented to the board. We've done a lot of work with them over the years and feel confident in their team to help us from a civil engineering perspective. And GKO Architects as well would be part of our team in this effort. With that, John and I and the team will be here to answer any questions that you have.
First, just from a budget standpoint, $3 million, that's the full scope of our capital improvements fund right now, Mark?
Being the conservative business manager I am, $3 million, yes. Is that the total amount in our capital projects fund? No. So we'll.
Are you willing to share what the amount is?
I
or-
believe we will probably, once everything gets paid out with the remaining of the contracts that Mr. Lynch talked about, we've cut a purchase order based on board approval for roof restoration, the last section over here at the middle school, as well as our tennis courts. So I believe we'll have about 3.5, but the ICS guys didn't hear that.
Okay.
So we have a little bit of a cushion. We believe in meeting with these folks that this is a good starting point. Definitely, and I apologize, I was talking to Mr. Lynch, but one of the big items I can tell you, and I know Mr. Freeman is in the audience, and he's probably can't wait to have the dehumidification system at our middle school now, swimming pool, replaced. That would have been number one on my priority list. So we really work together with ICS to kind of say, you know, we've talked about warm, safe, and dry. We want to continue being warm, safe, and dry as we move forward strategically, both with the projects and with available funding. And then obviously with an eye forward with not only some bigger projects that could be down the line, but also hopefully with another potential grant opportunity if Governor Shapiro includes that in this upcoming budget.
And Mark, just to follow up, would we be able to extend this into 2 calendar year budgets? In other words, $3 million.
So you're
$1.5 million in 2025, 26.
you could. Your capital projects fund is not year specific.
Okay.
So I mean, I could spend $2.5 million one year and 500,000. It doesn't really matter. It's just when we spend it. Now, based on the phasing of how this will shake out and what we how this will be planned, some items will come up for payment sooner than others. I think one of the most important things that we talked about with these gentlemen is that this first tranche of projects will not affect instruction at all. We think that's very important. We know when we get down to building-wide renovations, obviously instruction will be affected. You know, ceiling tiles will be out at times, and obviously you try to minimize this, but this is a lot of the kind of the backbone stuff that you can do, you know, behind the scenes, and some of the things obviously in the summertime, which would be a good thing.
Thank you.
A couple questions. Are the different configurations that you mentioned, for instance, the dehumidification and the chiller thing, are those reflected in the budget numbers that you proposed, the different configurations? That's one question. The second, these large ticket items, would they be able to be repurposed at the time of a larger renovation, building renovation? And are those cost savings reflected in what you had proposed in your larger report? Or would we expect those numbers potentially to come down because we repurpose some equipment?
Yeah, so good questions. The first question around the different configurations. So we believe that the budget can support that. That's why we also baked in design contingency as part of those construction estimates to give you some flexibility with scope and design. But our job, if you did proceed into design, is to flag these items, re-estimate as we're getting closer to going out to bid to make sure that you've got a scope that you can fit within this $3 million budget. And if there are any issues, we bring them up at that point and we make a decision together. The second question is, I believe if you invested money into these projects and then did a renovation, would it be money that would, you know, like good money after bad type question? Is that how I
More so just
understand that?
even keeping the equipment to be used, still be used after a larger renovation?
Yeah, and that would be the intent. I mean, so these are targeted replacements. You would need, you know, your chiller plant to operate after a renovation anyway, right, for instance. And the pool, unless for some reason that pool area got demolished and rebuilt, you would be reusing the dehumidification unit.
So I have a couple of questions. The $3 million budget came from where? Is that a number we gave to ICS?
We said we could approximate about $3 million of projects. Can you give us a priority listing to spend down that money?
And are we taking into consideration, so many of us know that there is a contingency out there that as soon as we pull for some permits, that we're going to be on the hook for doing some fire suppression at some of our buildings. Is that any of this bid going to trigger that and put us in a position to have to satisfy that with the township sooner than we can afford or than we had planned on doing?
Yeah, we don't believe any of that would pull for building permits. These are just straight renovations and replacement of major equipment, chillers, dehumidification. You're replacing units. So you're not pulling a permit for an electrical permit or anything like that.
And when we're not opening up the walls for any ductwork with regard to it either?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to go a little bit further with that, these projects really are looked at as more of a maintenance function type project. They're targeted, they're confined to the scope. This would not trigger a level 2 alteration, a level 3 alteration, which would kick you into, you know, full building code upgrades. So.
Any other questions?
Could I ask a quick one on Pine Road on the chillers? The separate chiller for admin, and it's noted as being unsupported in the network. With those changes, would that be either one system or separate systems, but supporting one another?
I'll let Cody speak to it. Cody developed the scope, so.
So all three of the early 2000 vintage buildings have similar control systems. They're antiquated, no longer supported. So last that I met with you all, we showed a plan that had identified DDC replacements at all three buildings. So those two buildings are still on the list, but we've chosen Murray because we're doing other work there. So those new chiller plants will be supported by the new DDC system, if that answers your question.
I guess my question, dealing with Pine Road, was that the controls are separate.
Correct.
I guess my question is, will they be on the same controller system, or would they continue to be as separate systems?
So that's correct. The rooftop unit at Pine Road is a standalone unit. The terminal equipment, the VAV boxes that serve the spaces, are on the 2010 era DDC system, which could support, the existing VAV boxes or new. So you would have the same controls that you have today in the Pine Road rooftop replacement project.
Would there be a cost difference?
That's accounted for in the budgets.
Just one quick question. You have this broken up into bid packages. There's 4 of them. Does that mean we could, it's like a la carte, we could choose to do 1, 2, 3, all 4 of them? Are they all standalone projects?
I can handle. So if the board is so inclined, what we would do at our January public meeting is bring forward a motion to proceed. And we can certainly bring forward a motion to proceed with 1, 2, 3 and 4. In addition, there will be AIA agreements that we would need to have approved to continue working with ICS as our design professionals. And lastly, there'll be an agreement, if the board is so inclined, to want to go with the, I want to make sure I get the terminology correct here, the conceptual design plan for the stadium project, of which, again, as Tim said, we're applying the cost of the feasibility study against those charges. So those would be separate motions that would be forthcoming if the board is so inclined at our January public meeting.
And that 29,000 and change fee was just for the stadium
Yes, that's correct.
passing?
The other costs that are in different buckets have design fees
Built into
included
them.
in them. Soft costs are
Soft costs,
included in those. They're not necessarily apples to apples because we split them out, but in total, yes, those costs are in there.
I think, Mr. McGuinn, per Mr. Geiger's question and, you know, the potential steps for the board at the next meeting, you know, I think, you know, understanding exactly where these monies are going to be coming from and what that impact would be on the remaining fund would be, I think, good to have. And I know, you know, the next presentation will perhaps start that conversation, but I think if we are to potentially vote on these resolutions at the next meeting, I think a better understanding might be.
We can have a slide of sources and uses, for lack of a better term, but yeah, and kind of a projection out of some of the other items that have not been spent, will not be spent until the springtime, for example, but at least funds that we've already approved for, i.e. tennis courts and roof. Absolutely.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the ICS team? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your time.
That'll bring us to Mr. Gwynn, your budget presentation for 2025, 2026.
I'm hoping that the board and the community has had an opportunity to review our budget presentation for this evening. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. What is yellow highlighted is the path that we took with the possibility of utilizing referendum exceptions. That would be, we'll adopt a preliminary expenditure budget at our January meeting. So you'll see a motion next meeting just to approve the expenditure line item, expenditure budget. Once that is done, budget is submitted to the state, and then the referendum exception system will open. We'll apply for the exception, and PDE will approve or deny. We're assuming they'll approve based on our expenditures and our analysis. Again, this is the process. I'm not going to go through every line item. What's in bold in January public meeting is adopting the preliminary expenditure budget. In April, we would again approve a proposed final budget, and in June, approving a final budget. We are not setting a tax rate in January. We are not setting a tax rate in April. Tax rate is always set in June based on where we shake out with revenues and expenditures for our budget. Facts to consider. Obviously, we've talked about Act 1. We've talked a little bit about retirement rates. I have a couple slides on those. Salary and benefits, which make up about 65% of our budget. We have a lot of unknowns. We have negotiations for our teachers, our custodians, our administrators. So there's a lot of unknowns in the budget. And then obviously a potential capital projects transfer, which we've talked about before. And kind of what I envision is hopefully bringing a balanced budget to the board later in the spring and giving the board various options. If you want a $100,000 line item for capital projects transfer, here's what it'll be, 200,000, 300,000. Similar to what our folks at ICS brought to us, kind of a wish, not a wish list, but a various cookbook things of what we want to try to put
Amend
into
you.
our budget. I think it's prudent that we absolutely examine each one of those items. But again, we are still 4 or 5 months down the road. Act 1 rates, just a reminder, 4% is actual. That has been announced by the Department of Education. The other items, the other rates, excuse me, that are forecast by the Independent Fiscal Office, the IFO, you see it. Those are published numbers, 3.7, 3.4, 3.2, and 3.2. Act 1 index is definitely going down. There's no guarantee that a referendum exception would be available to us in any of those years moving forward. That's kind of the baseline of what we want to look at as we move forward. I just want to show this PSERS number for a couple reasons. One, you could see, and this is from PSERS themselves. There was another page here, but if you went back to 01, 02, and something like that, that rate was 1.72. You saw some really large jumps as it ballooned up. It's been in the mid-30s for the past 6-7 years. This is the rate that's been announced for next year. Looks kind of like the rate from last year, and this year is a dip of 0.1%. If you look at the projections, again, this is from their 12/20 meeting, you see these numbers. These numbers look very familiar to me because they always kind of project these numbers, but look back here, it really hasn't moved much. PSERS has stabilized. These numbers assume a 7% rate of return. You see that the projected jumps, even if those would come to fruition, is a 0.72% jump from 25-26 to 26-27. So I'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about use of fund balance. You've seen this slide before, how much of 4% is generated. What could be potentially generated is in referendum exception and potential new money. Our expenditure budget. We're increasing expenditures, and I underline expenditures, of 2.76%. If you recall, we used a fair amount of fund balance this year, 3.129 in fund balance this year, of which 1.5 was for a debt service payment that we were able to incorporate and exhaust that committed fund balance for debt service. So that line item goes back down in the sense for here, back to where it was after the spike. So that 1.5 goes away. The projected fund balance at the end of this year, if all of our fund balance is used, is 3.48%. PDE recommends a limit on unreserved fund balance for our size of about 8%. Right here, you'll see this number. Right now, our projected shortfall is about $3.5 million. And I'll explain a little bit about that. But part of it is the amount of fund balance that we used this year. If you recall, there was some strategy in using that fund balance, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. So here's our Act 1 index number. Here's our referendum exception number. We're still short $784,000. Do not panic. After I panicked first, so sorry. Just some highlight of some new expenditures. Some of these will look familiar. Number one, if you recall, back in November, I believe, we had to add a special education teacher at Pine Road due to our caseloads and number of move-ins. We had a night custodian already in our budget for our high school. We quickly realized come July 1, that we needed a night custodian at our middle school as well. We did not include that in last year's budget. We put it in for this current year, currently working. The middle school is almost as public as the high school, so definitely a value added there. We have some special education behavioral services increases. Again, some of those behavioral services are necessitated by students who move in. Those is money well spent in that if we were not spending it here, most likely some of those students would be placed out. Transportation and gasoline increases. Transportation is a 4.2% increase in our first student contract. Gasoline will be bid next month, but we're projecting a little bit of an increase there. I have a one-time, once every 4 years, of a tax collector bond. It gets paid due to getting a discount if you pay it for 4 years. That is done in conjunction with our township. And then some curriculum initiatives that we've talked about already. Data warehousing, local professional development, taking that out of our federal grants and making that into our general fund.
Mr. McGuinn,
yes.
just a second, please. I appreciate you putting data warehouse under curriculum initiatives, because this has now broken a streak of 7 years in a row where you've included new technology expenditures. Yeah. So I appreciate you shifting that over, and I just wanted everyone to note that.
Is that going to necessitate you staying, or no? No, I'm just kidding. These budget figures do include, or will include, the reallocation of funds for the administrative positions by repurposing our IST and dean of students, so we're going to try to make that as budget neutral as possible. Excuse me. What are some of our strategies? So if you recall, with our PSERS fund balance, I'm using 200,000. I could use up to 200 more. That would exhaust that line item, but that's a possibility. Healthcare, right now we have a 19.2% renewal, which is head scratching, to say the least. There's a potential of using more there. I would caution against that, in that you would have to make that up. That's more of a kind of a building on building on building a number. And we're only using 110,000 of unrestricted fund balance. That's a very low number. We typically use more than that, but we want to try to get as a budget that's using less fund balance, because we have less fund balance as we move forward, so that we're not relying on those one-time funds. So, revenue side, absolutely extremely conservative. I haven't made any adjustments for earned income tax or transfer tax or interest earnings, even though right now they are all showing gains from where I was at this point last year. So we can certainly entertain those. Earned income tax, as more folks move in to second line item, the over 55, we're going to get earned income tax, guaranteed. I'm not going to go hog wild on that, but we could. The assessment increases are not reflected in here yet. Only one property is settled, and the first property was assessed at $288,160. I have this next slide on where Montgomery County Board of Assessments came up with that. If we assume that, and forgive me, I always thought it was 175 units. It's 176 units. So one is settled, 175 are still outstanding. If you assume an assessment of 250, and in talking to the assessor for our district from the county of Montgomery, he believes that most properties will be assessed roughly at that 288 number, as in most of the units are going to be the same. 32 feet wide, you know, they may have different amenities. Some might be a little bit more, some might be a little bit less, but he believes that number, the 288 number, is probably where a lot of those are going to be. I'm using 250, but you would generate $1.8 million of new tax dollars if they all settled next year. So let's take that 1.8 and go back. If I had my shortfall right here, we're still short 784, but now add 1.8. I'm looking a lot better. I'm looking a lot better. So, let me keep going. Again, 175 properties are still outstanding, assuming you get one-time tax revenue, one time for the transfer tax. First property sold at 1.1 million. If I assume 750, being conservative, you would have a one-time real estate transfer tax bump of over $650,000. So, my recommendation tonight, as well as for the next few months, is to continue to monitor the sales and assessments of that development and adjust our budget accordingly. And again, we talked about this, and I remember having discussions with Dr. Lee saying, what's coming? We know what's coming, the over 55 development. We knew that during last year, so that's kind of how we talked about our budget strategy and some of the reasons why we didn't go up to the Act 1 index last year. I'm going to be, everyone can read this, I'm going to be real generic on this, but I did have a conversation with our assessor on how exactly assessments are determined. Assessments have nothing to do with the sales price of the house. Nothing. It does when you go to get it reassessed, but right now it has nothing to do with the assessment of a property. Essentially, the County of Montgomery has an assessment program, and they plug in all the statistics or the facts of each property. The style of the home. Is it a single family? You know, is it a colonial? Is it a split level? Is it a townhome? Total square footage plugged into this program. Number of bathrooms. How much land is sitting on the dwelling? And then obviously the various finished areas. So this, based on the one property that I was discussing with him that settled, that came with a assessment of $288,000, or $288,160. Sold for $1.1 million. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. Comes down to what's called a common level ratio. In a future board report, I will denote from the State Tax Equalization Board what that kind of does or how that's calculated. But right now it's calculated at 32.9%. So, in taking our computer-generated or program-generated assessment number, and if you divide it by the common level ratio, which basically tries to equate all the properties in Montgomery County as the same, it comes out for a market value of about $875,000. But it sold for 1.1. But this is saying it should have been 875. So, again, I mentioned this, the assessor believes that most of the properties will probably be the same. Right now there are 50 building permits out of the 176 units. In driving through there last Friday, I must have seen 20 to 25 signs that had said sold on them so far. So again, back to our yellow, we're going to continue to monitor and obviously update the board and adjust accordingly. Next steps. Next meeting, preliminary expenditure budget, not setting a tax rate. By January, go through the state's referendum exception system, apply for the referendum exception. February through April, continue to refine, continue to update the board, where our progress are. April, bring a proposed final. Again, we're not setting the tax rate. Again, we're only approving the expenditure budget. May and June, continue with the progress. And in June, we would set our tax rate. And all during that time, we will certainly be keeping the board updated. And again, my goal is to try to give various menu options for the board to set the district up moving forward for a continual replenishment, or at least a contribution into the capital projects fund. So I know I hit the board with a lot of words, not many numbers, but some numbers, and a lot of analysis. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, since we're on the topic of real estate, so the timing, I'm curious about the timing, right? So you're seeing permits 50 out of 176, maybe 25 sold signs. What would be the time frame that these houses would have to settle for us to get the one-time tax benefits for this budget?
So the one-time transfer tax.
Transfer tax, yes.
So we'll probably see some of those this fiscal year. We'll see, and we'll be able to judge how many are outstanding for next fiscal year. That would be a line item I would probably be a little bit more conservative on. I would also be conservative on our interim taxes, because if you don't get the assessment by June, and their assessments, suppose a property sells in August, the assessment for that property is essentially right now vacant land.
Mm-hmm.
Once they settle, if they settle in August, they go up to 288. That triggers our tax collector to send an interim tax bill to that homeowner to pay for 11 months' worth of school taxes. So there's a line item in our budget for interim taxes. So all those are all kind of tied together. We want to make sure that we're budgeting conservatively on that. I can't tell you right now, based on what I saw when I drove past there last Friday, I saw a lot of sold signs. Now, I think right now with the weather and the forecast, unfortunately, I think construction may slow a little bit. But in talking with the township manager, he still believes that most of these properties, he had originally thought they would start coming online late calendar year 2024, which one did. But the majority would be in calendar year 2025. So it'll kind of cross over 2 years, but we'll get the benefit of the increased assessments in between now and June, excuse me. But we'll also get that tax revenue, one-time tax revenue between now and June. So we would probably, instead of, a $600,000 number, maybe only make it a $250,000 number for next year.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, the permits filing and the selling of these homes, this is all public record. I mean, are we able to know with certainty when these houses are coming online for us?
With certainty, not necessarily with certainty, but all I can do is continue to communicate with the township manager. And again, in another board report, I just spoke to him last week, so I'll be updating that the sheet that I've been updating the board on various developments in the township. In speaking to the township manager, he doesn't believe right now, he believes they're still selling. He does indicate that he believes the builder may come to a staff meeting and ask for a change to potentially sell. Right now, they're all 32 feet width units. He believes they may come in and ask to sell some 28-foot width units to kind of make the price range a little bit more than what it is right now. So maybe some will be in the 600s, as opposed to what's on the sign right now, which is mid 700s.
Mark, when you said you saw roughly 50 sold signs, you're talking
I said 20.
20, I'm sorry. That was in the development,
Yeah.
fulfillment, okay.
Yeah, with permits have been issued to build units that are up and look like they're almost ready. I didn't count those, but it looks like they're in blocks of 4. So there's at least, I think there's at least 10 of them, I think. I'm not sure. I didn't see up top. I don't know if they're building up top close to Pine Road. I did see the country club has put up the fence for the tennis courts and the pickleball courts. Thank you, Mr. Geiger.
All right. With that, I guess it's my turn then, can I? So Mark, yes, I fell over looking at this at home, as you said, because it was 2.76 more than last year.
Expenditure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, which is that 3.5 million number. Have you any idea, like, you know, obviously our taxpayers give us most of the revenue, if not all of it, but then the state, I know the state increased their budget, $1.2 billion, it was the largest increase ever.
Yep. So our numbers
what
for
can
our
we expect from the state?
Yeah, I have no idea what I'm expecting from the state this year. I can tell you that what's included in my budget for 25, 26 is what we're slated to get this year. So it's about a total of about a $400,000 increase between special education and basic education, and about $20,000 of charter school revenue.
Right.
That was included in Governor Shapiro's budget. We're putting that line item back into our budget first time in 12 to 15 years.
Okay. When are we going to find out how much our taxpayers will get with that homestead exclusion?
May 1st is when what is announced is the amount of gambling proceeds, which have been over the last, so there was a bump 3 years ago, fairly big bump, and then consistently over the last 3 years, the gambling number has been the same. And the other part of that is our Sterling tax credits, money that comes from people who work in Philly but who live here, that money comes back. I could tell you that that number that we get from Berkheimer versus the number they gave us last year is higher. So I would assume that the homestead exclusion might be a little bit more. Off the top of my head, I think it was like $512 last year.
Is it the same for everyone?
It's the same for everyone.
Yeah, no,
whether
I
you
think
have
it was-
$1 million house or whether you have a $200,000.
I think it jumped up by like 510 to like 570.
Yeah, off the top of my head.
It went up big last year.
Yeah,
so.
it was a big number. And again, remember, we're going to be having more folks potentially moving in, and maybe more of those folks are working in Philadelphia.
Okay.
I would foresee, based on what has been told to us by the township, that the pending BET investment, which is slated for folks who work in the city, take the train into the city, that's where I think you'll probably see a jump.
Okay.
So again, if I'm projecting forward, what's coming in this township, you have an over 55 development. You're going to most likely have that BET development. I don't see any for major barriers. Certainly we'll get school-age children, but we'll get a nice bump in the total assessment dollars. And you'll also have, and you'll see this in this week's board report, coming, if you remember, maybe 2 board reports, I talked about the property, the self-storage facility on Philmont Avenue that was part of the LRTA, the local government tax incentive program to have businesses in there. That's growing each year. Starting in year 6, which would be in the 29-30 school year, you'll start to get 5 years worth of 5-year phase-in of the Crescent Fields assisted living home right across from Wawa. That'll increase assessments about $3 million a year for 5 years. So that's a nice incentive that's coming down the line. So you do have some things that are going to grow your tax base. You have one, obviously, development that's probably going to produce school-age children.
Right. Thank you.
There certainly has been it seems like every year, different sectors of city employees are getting relaxed. I guess they're allowed to move out of the city, right? It started with firefighters and police officers several years ago, and it seems like every year I'm hearing different
I think by
types of
necessity, but
employees
yes. Mhm.
are being allowed to. So as that happens,
Yeah.
that's where that sterling credit.
You get a little bit more sterling
Bumps up.
credit, yep.
Yeah. Uh, You could see that the train station has gotten cars again, you know. So that tells me the people, yeah, obviously people had to go back to work, but there's more people that are moving into the township that do work in the city.
You have that a little bit offset by people who have the opportunity to work from home,
Yeah. Yep.
obviously.
So that's, you know, the conversations that we've had publicly and personally, as far as not jumping the gun to raise taxes if we try to hold out as long as we can for some of these infusions to come our
Understood.
way. Yeah,
Understood?
yeah.
So if there's no other questions, just to remind the board, what we'll see at the next meeting is just a motion to approve preliminary expenditure budget in the amount of whatever my number was. Again, not setting a tax rate, not doing anything, but just keeping the process going for the 25-26 budget.
Ms. Morgan, can you just give us some perspective on the 2.76 expenditure increase compared to last year? How does that compare to prior years, even taking into account?
That's low. It's very low, but last year's was artificially high because of the $1.5 million one-time debt service payment. So it kind of skewed it a little bit. Typically, we've been running, honestly, between 5 and 6% increase per year. Remember, salary and benefits, 65% of your budget. Again, continued growth in our special needs costs, which again is borne out in the potential referendum exception. Unfortunately, a lot of this is the cost of doing business. If you recall, in our analysis that we provide as part of the budget book, about 91% of our budget is either fixed or mandated based on employment agreements, benefits, negotiations, contracts, things that are mandated that, sometimes you don't think about is vocational education, mandated, have to pay it. Transportation, certainly not mandated, but good luck trying to get rid of transportation. So annual audit, absolutely mandated. Just everything that the district control it's fairly minor, unfortunately. So again, we've talked about some of the things here. We have some big things to go through, and we'll certainly do that diligently and tactfully. But it's a lot of unknown right now, so it's a lot of assumptions.
Did I hear you say that our health benefits, we got a 19+% increase from last year? Wow.
Wow.
That was first pass? Or that's an actual?
That's first look.
First look, yeah. Wow.
So Glenn, I guess a similar question, the projected shortfall of 3.5 million, how does that compare to prior years at this early stage of budget?
It's a little bit higher. Prior years, we would use a little bit more fund balance. I'm trying to scale that back. I want to leave us in ideally, you don't want to use any fund balance, but most districts don't do that. Having your revenues equate to expenditures. We're a little bit higher, but I think, remember, we knew we were going to be higher this year because of where we kind of held back last year. Again, knowing what was coming, knowing that, potential year 2 of state revenue build in for for our district that has been shortchanged by the state, knowing that the over 55 development would be closer to becoming online. Yeah, it's daunting, but again, don't panic. I do a lot of that already for everybody, but I think we'll be okay. I think there's good rationale and good timelines for things coming our way. And again, this is again from the revenue side. We will work our fingers to the bone on the expenditure side. We will certainly review every line item. You know, we even haven't gone back to our principals yet and say, hey, can you cut, you know, $10,000 out of your building budget? You know, we haven't done that yet. It's certainly an activity we will. Mr. Giordano and Ms. O'Malley will continue to go through all of our IEPs, all of our special needs to say, hey, do we need this or can we do without? We always have to balance, obviously, the needs of our taxpayer. We understand this. And I want to say this out loud and to the public. With the over 55 development and with projected BET endowment, I have a feeling we're going to be about 92% residential. That's not a good recipe, my opinion. That's a lot of bedrooms. It's a bedroom community. And unfortunately, it's taxpayers. We know that. The industry, the lack of industry right here in our district, it hurts us when it comes to these decisions. So we need to be certainly cognizant of the taxpayers, but we also continually need to do what's best for kids, because I can tell you this probably with 100% certainty. If I take a house, if I take a single-family home in Lower Moreland, a two-story colonial, give that exact house in Abington, in Cheltenham, I'm going to get more of a price here than I am. And why is that? What's the number one commodity in Lower Moreland Township? This is a school district. I've said this many times. Nobody moves here to go shopping. Nobody moves here to go to take fast food. I try. So.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Quinn?
Mark, when we were looking at the line items in budget over, I think it was 10 years, I'm not quite sure, but there was a big jump, transportation.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 2-year jump.
Yep.
Do we anticipate a jump like that?
I don't. That was a big, if you recall, 3 years ago, there was kind of almost like wasn't a dip, but it was kind of like a level where I was projecting an increase. I think PDE undercharges the 1 year, made up for it last year. I know exactly what was spent. This was particularly as it relates to Montgomery County IU special needs transportation. I know exactly what was spent for us. I'm waiting for the subsidy deduction report that comes out in February, and by golly, that thing better be right near that number, or someone at the state is going to hear from me, because I am not getting overcharged. Absolutely not.
Thanks. Appreciate your diligence.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
I think Dr. Best is deferring his superintendent's update, so we'll move to item agenda 4, personnel. Dr. Galdo, Ms. Galdo, can you take us through item A, please?
Certainly. So under long-term subs, we have 2 new long-term subs. Julia McGee is being recommended for grade 3. That position already started and lasts till the end of the school year. Julia Palmero, thank you, is recommended as a grade 1 teacher at Pine Road. This is a continuation. She's been there since the beginning of the school year. The teacher who she's filling in for extended her leave, so she's now recommended to stay in that position starting January 2nd to the end of the school year. Jessica Harrigan is recommended as a new hire in the business office as an administrative assistant for business operation. Her position was supposed to start yesterday. It was actually snow day, so her first day in the office was today. And we have 3 new mentors recommended.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Can we discuss item B, athletic extracurricular contracts and stipends, please?
Okay, we have 2 recommended for the high school, an assistant lacrosse coach, Deborah Lauer, and boys basketball, JV boys basketball, Rick Fettel.
Comments or questions? Thank you, Ms. Galdo. If not, we'll move to agenda item 5, Dr. Heinrich for curriculum, please.
We have a request for 3 math teachers to go to a training through Patan. There is no cost to the district for the training.
Comments or questions? If not, we'll move to the next agenda item, B, the high school program of studies.
This one I won't do from my seat. Am I on? Good evening. Thank you all for your patience. I want to thank Mr. Miles and Mr. Thomas who are here. They've done a tremendous amount of work in bringing me up to speed on our high school program, and so I appreciate them very much. We don't have a ton of changes this year, which, given how much we've heard tonight, is probably a good thing. I am going to ask Mr. McGuinn to help me get my next car because he sounds like the right guy to take. I love going. Do you? All right. It's a lunch date. No, it's great. And I hate it, so it'll be good. And then we'll make it a class at the high school. Negotiations 101 by Mr. McGuinn. I love it. It is a good idea. We'll put that in next year's. Make a note, Justin. All right, so we have annual changes. We have some changes to our verbiage. We have a little bit of updates to course descriptions. We have 2 new courses to recommend, and we have an update to our credit count. The changes to the program of studies are made in collaboration with teachers, department coordinators, the school counselors, the administration at the high school, and then the curriculum department as well. And we are presenting them to you for information today with the hope that we can have approval in 2 weeks and start the course selection process for our high school students in February. Our first update is about college credits. The state requires schools now to have a dual enrollment opportunity, which Lower Moreland Township High School has had opportunities for students to take classes in college for enrichment. We also have a course through an articulation agreement with Gwinnett Mercy University, which is our personal finance course. We are clarifying in our program of studies the difference between dual enrollment, students who can take courses for enrichment. They don't figure into their GPA or their transcript. However, they're earning credits at the university or college that they take them. And then also the opportunity for dual credit where the college course would also then fulfill a credit requirement through the high school. We have changed the term summer school to credit recovery, which is a more appropriate and more modern term. The students still take the course usually in the summer, although sometimes it could happen during the school year, to recoup credits they did not gain in a traditional school year, but we don't call it summer school anymore because we don't bring them all in like that movie, The Breakfast Club. I guess that was Saturday school, but sorry, I'm showing my age. One other minor but important credit update. We're not changing our health and PE requirement. The district requires students to take PE for 4 years for 3 out of 6 days. That's a half credit by high school credit allotment. Unfortunately, we've been counting it as a quarter credit, but it's a half. So students will take the same amount. We're just correcting the number to make sure that we are accurately reflecting the time that they're investing in the course and the times that the teachers are teaching. On the same required versus elective idea of graduation requirements, we have a course that's run traditionally at Lower Moreland Township High School called Creativity and Collaboration in the Arts. It's a great course. It's been a required course. Students have been required to take this course, which is a half credit, and then 1 additional fine arts credit. For most of our students, this is appropriate. We're proposing not having it be a requirement anymore because in some cases, for some students, it becomes an obstacle. So when we talk about a beginning high school level music and art collaboration, if you're already taking wind ensemble and chorus, you don't really need the beginning part of the music class that's in here. We would rather let those students get their music credits, take an art or other opportunity for fine arts, but this half credit can sometimes take up a space where then they can't fit a full credit course. So it will still be offered, many students will still take it, but it will become one of the ways students can fulfill their fine arts requirements. Because of that, instead of saying creativity and collaboration +1, we're saying a total of 1.5. So if you are in wind ensemble, you could take an art class for the other half that you're required. Certainly students can take more than that, but that's the minimum requirement. And then I did explain in PE, we adjusted the credit count so that each year for 4 years, it will go up by half so that we don't drastically alter anyone's credit counts, but that over the 4 years, we begin to accurately reflect what we're offering our students and what they are accruing. The two courses that we're proposing to offer, one is an elective PE course. So at Lower Moreland Township High School, students have taken 9th grade PE, 10th grade PE, 11th grade PE, 12th grade PE. The Health and PE department is ready to design a half-credit elective course that will meet the state standards for health and physical education, but can be elected by the students instead of the traditional 11th and 12th grade. To be quite honest, I'd like to have some more electives down the road, but this is where we are for now. And I think doing it well is more important than doing it quickly. And I'm very impressed with our health and PE teachers and their excitement about offering this. The other change you're probably aware of, our freshmen have taken a course called Chemistry and Physics, which is like a Chem and Physics light. It's a little bit redundant because they do those courses again later in high school. But with the new Pennsylvania Steels standards, I'm really excited. The Lower Moreland Township High School and the science department in the district, their curriculum is really relevant and really already where it needs to be. And so we'll remove the Chem and Physics class. Those concepts are already taught in junior and senior year classes. And we're replacing the required freshman year course as environmental science, which will meet the engineering and environmental science literacy aspects of the STEELS standards, which should keep our students right where they need to be. If you remember, last month we looked at how strong our science growth and achievement was. Well, this is why. We have great teachers and really hardworking administrators who are ahead of where they need to be in rolling this out. And so this is really exciting. I'm sure you're excited. And so we are going to remove our environmental science honors course, not really, because now it's a freshman course, but it used to be an elective for juniors and seniors. We don't need that elective for juniors and seniors anymore because all the students will be exposed to that. We will keep the AP course because that will be the next level of what our students take as freshmen. Freshman Chem and Physics is being removed because it's being replaced. Design Lab, Research Design, and Philosophy Humanities 2 are also going to be removed because in doing a course audit, the content there is replicated in other courses that we have. So as we move forward, we're not making them go away forever. They'll sit in the course catalog. They just won't be offered right now, and they haven't filled. So it gives us the opportunity by inactivating those courses to work with our teachers and our students to say, all right, what's next? What are you excited about? What might you feel passionate about? What kind of electives do you want to have? This is our tentative timeline. We would begin course selection meetings in early February for both the high school students and our rising 9th graders from the middle school. They would also have that experience in February, and of course that is pending board approval of the changes to the program of studies. I'm happy to take any questions, and they came to make sure I didn't answer wrong. So if you have questions for Mr. Miles or Mr. Thomas, they're here as well.
Is there any potential impact on the science standardized testing and the curriculum that would be expected to be, that kids
At
will
the high
understand?
school level? So in the high school, students are required to test after completing biology. There is an aspect of environmental science in the biology unit, but not sufficient to meet the STEEL standards. However, as strong as our growth is, I actually think this order could have an impact, but it would be a positive impact. It would be students having more experience with the STEEL standards prior to taking the test. Although the state has told us that the biology Keystone exam won't be dramatically different, which I hope because our kids are doing so well on it, but I think we're well prepared. I think if we see an impact, it'll be a positive one.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Heinrich?
Dr. Hendrick, there's a motion for $6,000 cost. Is that for the printing of the program of studies? Is that what?
No, sir. The $6,000 is for the new course for materials that we might not have. We have some materials for environmental science because we've run that course. However, we haven't run it for an entire class. So that's the initial materials cost to move from the chemistry physics course to the environmental science course. It could be a license for an online textbook. It could be some things we dissect. Materials cost.
Material. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And Mr. Miles offered to have a bake sale to pay for it. No, I'm only kidding. He didn't.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I do have a update for
Oh, sorry.
the committee. Mr. Cole isn't here this evening, but if you would like me to
Yeah,
continue.
sure. That's agenda item 6, DEI.
Yes. So 2 updates are LMTSD Catalyst Group, which is our high school students group, is off and running, doing very exciting things. They were able to participate in their first meeting for leadership with the team from the University of Pennsylvania, and they're very excited in February to go to the University of Pennsylvania to work on their second leadership forum there. They have also focused on recruiting underclassmen, and since last month, they've identified 12 new members for the group, which is exciting, and they're in the process of planning their first big event district-wide for February called Wear Your Culture Day, and there will be more information to follow. They also have been invited and are very excited to participate in the district's DEI Council. This month, at the end of this month, the DEI Council, which is a group of students, staff, and community members, will reconvene in partnership with the Montgomery County IU and work on proposing or supporting the crafting of a policy about equity and educational excellence to give feedback and make recommendations to the board's standing policy committee meeting. They will meet 4 times this semester. The first time will be on January 28th. Invitations were sent to all previous members of the DEI Council. The majority of them have indicated that they would like to continue with this work. And once we get a full count, if we do not believe we have enough participants, we will recruit additional community members and staff as well.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, thank you for the update.
Thank you.
For agenda item 7, buildings and grounds, Mr. McGuinn.
Yes, Dr. Lee, we have one request for building use for the auditorium for a dance organization that's traditionally gone in and used our facilities.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this item? If not, we can move to agenda item 8, business and finance, the accounts payable checklist.
Yes, Dr. Lee, just the checklist dated 12/23 in the amount shown, if there's any questions.
Great, thank you. Mr. Giordano, are there any updates for student services? Okay. Dr. Hilt for technology? So 11, school board. Item A is a 2025-2026 Sweet Stevens Cats and Williams fee agreement as attached. Mr. McGuinn, can you provide an overview of how this compares to priors?
Similar to where they were last year. Again, they typically their standard rate, and it depends on if you're having a partner or one of their paralegals, but it's in line with what we had this current year.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on this fee agreement document? If not, we'll move to the next agenda item, B, district calendars 2025, 26, and 26, 27. I believe the updates as requested from previous board meetings are indicated in the agenda, specifically labeling of holidays, being added to both calendars. The spring break week had to be updated in terms of accuracy for dates, and an additional PD day for teachers added on October 21st, with the last day of school moving to June 11th for the 26-27 calendar. Are there any comments or questions for the administration on these district calendar updates?
It seems like on the academic calendar, we put the appropriate holiday for whatever reason the school's closed, but on the visual calendar, I don't believe it was added in some of the instances. So if we're going to be posting both of those to the website, I would think they should be consistent. But I didn't look at them real fully, but I think just the one, for example, in 2025, 26, if you go to the first tab there, for example, in January 1st, it just says holiday schools closed, 19th holiday schools and offices closed, 20. But if you go to the corresponding calendar for, it does have it there. Martin Luther King for the 19th, New Year's for the 1st.
Yeah, I think on the visual, it's been consistent. It just says holiday.
Right.
I think the one-page calendar provides a little bit more descriptor.
Okay. So they'll
I
be
think-
posted together?
Yeah.
So then they can just
Yep.
cross-reference them, okay.
Thank you. Any other comments and questions on the calendars? If not, we'll move to items C through G, which are second readings of the revised policies as listed. Give the board a moment to think of any questions or comments you have on these revised second reading policies, or second readings of these revised policies.
I have a question about the cyberbullying. It says, schools, there's a section on, I believe, page 2. School setting means in the school, on school grounds, in school vehicles, at designated school stop, on school-issued electronic devices. Now, is that received on a school electronic device or sent, or both? Question mark.
Which one are you referring to, Alex?
The bullying and
Bullying.
cyberbullying.
It would, it's meant to be any interaction on school electronic devices, meaning that they're considered school grounds, for lack of a better way to put it.
Right, but, I mean, a kid could send a message, like, they could send a message through email or something like that from their phone, but then it could be received on the school device. Does that make sense?
If it's the school email, that's also considered
Okay.
under the umbrella of school device, because
Okay.
it's on our network.
But not like a Yahoo or a Gmail?
We could still look into that, depending on the situation. But, you know, it would, the intent there in that situation would be if they send it through that. They could certainly send a Yahoo email. Well, actually, I don't think any of our students are using Yahoo.
know.
But they could use, let's say, a personal
so
Gmail they could get to on their school device, right? Yeah.
It's late.
I didn't mean to email shame you, but it's I still have a Hotmail account. But it is intended to be as inclusive as possible, meaning, you know, if you're causing a disruption to school or causing a problem for another student, you know, we can look into it in all these
So there's
angles.
gray area on
Yeah.
that,
Always.
almost for intent, I
Yeah.
guess.
Other comments on these 3, 4, or 5 or 6 policies? Okay, if not, agenda item H, this is the change order general contractor GC 016 to Borough Construction as attached for $39,799.75, as discussed previously by Dr. Lynch, Mr. Lynch this evening. Any comments or questions? Item I is the change order MC002 to Borough Construction for a credit of $58,792.18, as previously discussed. Any comments or questions? And then lastly, a change order, item J, GC-CO-004 to James Morrissey for $54,659.68 for the intersection improvement project as discussed earlier this evening. Any comments or questions? Okay, thank you. If not, is there any correspondence to the board?
There is not.
Any items for discussion? Is there any public comment this evening?
Nobody signed up for public comment.
If not, if there are no objections, I will move to adjourn to our next meeting on January 21st, 2025 in this building.